Do you want me to, in case, me also to record it?
Yep, why not? Just in case. Thank you.
Okay, let's go. Okay, good evening. Thank you for coming to our presentation. Our chosen topic is topic 4, cross-cultural communication in organization. We'll examine a case study when Australian manager is in charge of a multicultural team consists of both low and high context culture. As consultants, our goal is to analyze of the different communication preference, style, and practice across cultures, and how these differences affects communication within this culturally diverse team.
Excuse me,
Finally,
can I please disturb? Okay. How can I see the presenter? Okay, I'll have to move the attender. Okay, go ahead, please. Now I can see.
yeah, no worries. So after drawing from theories, we'll provide a recommendation for the Australian managers to improve communication within the team. Now, quickly for our agenda of the day, I will briefly go over our scenario, host context theories, and introduce the team culture within the scenario. Bradley and Bianca will discuss the impact of relationship, feedbacks, conflict management, performance, and in meetings in detail. Lastly, Noor would provide advice and recommendation for Australian managers. So our chosen scenario, we have a manager of a multicultural team in Australia who wants to improve communication. And the final goal is to improve communication. And our team currently consists of Australia and Japan and India, and that's low context culture and 2 high context culture. Some of the biggest challenges in multicultural team is navigating cultural norms, which are often invisible and deeply influential. As research indicates, team members may have unspoken expectation and what is considered to be normal. These assumptions often clashes and creating conflicting value around communications. Hidden bias and misinterpretation can occur when team members interpret messages through their own cultural lenses. Language formality and tones are also an aspect that affects clarity and trust, and that recognizing and adopting these cultural differences or bring awareness to these cultural differences is essential in effective leadership and communications. As defined by Hall's high and low context theory, the high context culture relies on implicit communication, nonverbal cue, and shared understanding, while low context cultures communicate meanings explicitly through words and directness. While the Hall's model appears to enable managers a simplified understanding, there has been some research about that have identified a number of issues, and they are overgeneralization, lack of validation, binary framework, insufficient consideration of the contextual factors, and culture, of course, changes over time. Going back to our scenario, as we can see, the Australian managers team consists of Australian members, Japanese members, and Indian members. This table summarizes how they communicate and highlights the difference in each. My team will discuss these in details, but now let's have a look at how each culture communicates. Starting with Australia communication, which reflects a low context culture, it means messages are conveyed clearly, directly, and with little reliance on non-verbal cues or shared background knowledges. Australians tend to favor open and informal discussions. Individual expressions are strongly valued, so team members are usually encouraged to speak up and share their opinion freely, regardless of hierarchy. In professional settings, feedback sometimes can be delivered openly and honestly, which is generally seen as constructive. Lastly, we have humor, which is a common feature in Australian communication. While it can help build rapport, it may cause confusions in multicultural teams if not used appropriately. For Japan, the Japanese communication reflects a high contact culture. Communication is subtle, implicit, and relies heavily on non-verbal cues and shared understanding. Messages are often indirect, especially in group settings. Hierarchy plays a major role. People may hesitate to speak up in front of superiors, and feedback is usually offered privately or indirectly. This is closely linked to the concept of face-saving, which will be further discussed. Silence in Japanese culture often signifies thoughtfulness and respectful disagreement. Lastly, India is another high context and collectivist culture. Communication tends to be indirect and nuanced, often shaped by the desire to maintain harmony and show respect. Rather than expressing disagreement openly, Indian professionals may use subtle cues, polite deferral, or silence to indicate concern. Similar to Japanese, hierarchy plays a significant role. Individuals often adjust the language and tone based on who they are speaking to. In India workplace, building relationship is just as important as completing the task. So now to complete the first section, an introduction to the scenario and the culture, I will now pass the floor to Bradley to further discuss the impact.
Thank you, Amber. So, as globalization continues to shape our workplaces, multicultural teams have become the norm, especially here in Australia. But with diversity comes complexity. And as Amber explained, one of the most critical challenges we face is cross-cultural communication. It's not just about language, it's about how people express ideas, build trust, handle conflict, and collaborate. So to truly understand the impact of cultural differences, we need to break it down and look at the 5 key areas where communication styles between low and high context cultures diverge significantly. So these areas are relationships, feedback, conflict, performance, and in meetings. Next slide, please. If we to begin with relationships, Stephen Covey was a respected businessman and author, and he highlighted that trust is the highest form of human motivation, and it brings out the best in people. So why is this important in the context of cross-cultural communication? Well, in low-context cultures like Australia, trust is built quickly through performance and clear agreements, but in high-context cultures such as Japan and India, trust is nurtured slowly through shared experiences and relational harmony. Next slide, please. So this difference can lead to misunderstandings. For example, silence from a Japanese or Indian colleague might be a sign of respect or reflection rather than disengagement. So to bridge this gap, we can consider the face negotiation theory by Professor Stella Toomey, where she highlighted that in individualistic cultures, people protect their own image and challenge ideas openly, whereas in collectivist cultures, they preserve group harmony, which is the key for their working preference. So when working across cultures, we must be mindful of how face-saving behaviours are interpreted. Next slide, please. So for best practice, we need to include cultural awareness training, adapting communication styles, and clarifying expectations with the ongoing goal of building hybrid practices to ensure mutual understanding. Next slide, please. But if we bring it back down to an individual level, an Australian manager should invest time in informal conversations, respect hierarchy, and be attentive to non-verbal cues. It will potentially necessitate the need to avoid being overly blunt, using more respectful and nuanced language while maintaining a strong respect for existing organisational hierarchies. You'll also note the key inverse considerations for any managers within the firm from high context cultures with recommendations required for them to communicate effectively with low context cultures. So there is an intentional effort required by all individuals involved. Next slide, please. And now let's talk about the scenario of feedback, both giving and receiving. And this is one of the most sensitive areas in cross-cultural communication. Next slide, please. So Australians tend to be direct and blunt, as Amber highlighted, viewing feedback as a tool for improvement, but in high context cultures, feedback is softened, indirect, and often delivered privately to preserve harmony. So the process of giving feedback has a number of nuanced and explicit aspects. And they can be around the communication style, which is direct versus indirect, explicit versus subtle, straightforward versus given through subtlety and context. Other ways could be in public settings versus private settings, or even the goal of the feedback itself could be there to promote improvement in a low context individual providing that feedback, or in a high context situation, preserving harmony and saving face. So the aspects of communication can be quite different and nuanced depending on the culture that it's coming from. Next slide, please, for some practical examples. So in giving feedback, an Australian manager might say, "You need to improve your report writing. It's too vague and missing key analysis." So while this is seen as an honest review in Australia, it could feel harsh or humiliating to a Japanese or Indian colleague. Conversely, a Japanese manager might say, perhaps next time we can think about another way to approach the report. And that's intended as feedback, but someone from a low context culture really might miss the message entirely. Next slide, please. So in considering the style of feedback, an Australian manager may present feedback quite bluntly, expecting this to be taken as helpful. And we can see the differences in potential responses by different employees, with a Japanese colleague feeling embarrassed or disrespected, as critique is normally given more subtly. In Indian culture, it might feel deeply shamed or direct criticism and withdraw as a result. Whereas the Australian employee may feel motivated by the opportunity to improve, and they may get confused if the feedback is too indirect and ask for clarification, which could feel confrontational to their other colleagues and counterparts. Next slide, please. So in this feedback scenario, an Australian manager giving feedback to a Japanese team member, instead of saying, you need to be more proactive in meetings, you're too quiet, rather they could say in a private setting, I really appreciate your thoughtful approach. In future meetings, it'd be great to hear more of your insights. Your perspective is valuable to the team. So this approach would preserve face, use respectful language, and aligns with the collectivist values of a high context culture. So really highlighting those opportunities to preserve face, use indirect respectful language through face negotiation, politeness theories, and recognizing Hall and Hofstede's collectivist values. So it's important when giving feedback to soften your voice and to use suggestive language and prioritize private settings. So when receiving that feedback, we can be aware of those opportunities. Next slide, please. So in summary, it's really important we understand these cultural differences. It's not just about avoiding miscommunication. It's also about building stronger and more inclusive teams. And this is ever so important in times of conflict. And Bianca is now going to take us through that section and further impacts.
Thanks, Bradley. So the next area we're looking at is conflict. So we're looking at low context countries, Australia, and our high context country, Japan and India. So the 4 aspects we're going to look at is conflict approach, the feedback style, how we comfort in a disagreement, and nonverbal cues. So in low context countries like Australia, we're more open and direct in our discussions. We like honesty and constructive feedback. However, in a high context country, they don't like that. They like it to be more in private, and they like to keep the harmony. So the impact on communication is that low context countries may be viewed as aggressive, and high context countries may be seen as avoiding the issue, and they may be even seen as misunderstood. Next slide, please. So I've got 2 scenarios here. I'm just going to go through one of them, our sports team conflict. So after losing a soccer team, the team captain crosses their arms and privately approaches each team member to kindly address the areas where performance could improve, offering constructive feedback on how to do better in the next game. So in a low context country, they don't prefer this approach because it looks like a lack of directness and does not allow people to openly express their thoughts. But high context countries, they like the private conversation, so they prefer this approach because it demonstrates care and consideration. The next slide, please. So to strategize around this is we can develop cultural awareness. So implementing cultural awareness training and team bonding to help each other understand cultural backgrounds. This could increase our understanding of each other. And also this can be complemented by a contingency leadership or leader who can practice and adapt the styles according to the needs and situation. Next slide, please. Our next area is performance. So the key aspects that we're going to look at is expectations, how they deliver feedback, recognition for their performance, and their communication style. So in Australia here, we like clear, defined goals. We like honesty, like what I said before, and they actually prefer individual recognition. However, in a high context country, they don't like the individual recognition. They like to have everybody recognized for all their work, and especially in performance expectations, they like just for expectations to be told, not have clear goals and KPIs like we do here. So the impact on communication is the low context countries like Australia, they prefer clarity. However, high context countries, they find that it may be aggressive and too strict. Next slide, please. So one of the examples we're going to go through is work task incompletion. So a manager needs to address an employee's missed deadlines and implement performance management. So in Australia, they prefer this approach because it's specific and task orientated, and it's giving clear feedback. However, high context countries don't like this because it's too strict. They prefer more respectful communication style. So for example, they may prefer saying, we have noticed some deadlines have been missed. Is there any way that we can support you in preventing this in the future? Next slide, please. So strategies for recognizing performance is like before, cross-cultural competence training, so developing cognitive skills like self-awareness, empathy, mindfulness that will allow managers and our team members to understand and recognize cultural differences, and also having a pyramid model of global leadership. So managers and leaders can implement global leaders with a pyramid model approach. This can engage in cultural awareness, sensitivity, and recognition in leaders. Next slide, please. Now, the last area we're going to look at is in meetings. So in meetings, the 4 different aspects of meeting objectives, speaking styles, participation, and conflict. So in low context countries like Australia, we like an agenda. We like open discussion. However, in high context countries like Japan and India, they like more of the meeting to be just as a guide. And they like more leaders to be talking and less participation from the crowd. So the impact on communication is that high context countries may be perceived as too structured and too strict. And high context countries may see participation as inappropriate and unprofessional. Next slide, please. So one of the 2 scenarios I've had here is team project review meeting. So a project team gathers to address any issues or challenges in a meeting. So low context countries, they may like the structured agenda because it encourages to review and discuss any issues. However, high context countries, they like to have their task allocated tasks talked about in private and a way to avoid public critique and keep the harmony. Next slide, please. So lastly, strategies for cross-cultural communication in meetings. So identifying and adapting global team synergy. So prior to meetings, leaders should assess and review the cultural setting of the team. Each team should identify backgrounds and beliefs and communication styles. This will allow leaders to adopt suitable communication styles to ensure that team members in the meetings are comfortable and inclusive. And of course, team bonding, introducing regular team bonding sessions or days to actively promote teams to share their understanding of beliefs and cultural awareness. And next slide. I'm going to pass on to Noor now. He's going to talk about his part.
Thank you, Bianca. Now I'll be running through lastly just the recommendations here that we provide to Australian managers in terms of just creating a list of things they can do to make communication better in teams with people from different cultures. Just meant to obviously not only stop misunderstandings, but also make teams stronger, more cooperative, and a little bit more productive as well. Now on to the next slide. So our first recommendation, that's going to be around building cultural intelligence, commonly known as CQ. This means being able to connect with and work well with people from other cultures. It's not enough to only know facts about other cultures. We do need to understand how to change and how we act and talk based on the situation. Now, this indicates that Australian managers should be interested, open-minded, and willing to think about things. Offering formal training or team talks about cultural values and hidden bias can be a terrific place to start. Moving on to the next slide. Now, our next recommendation, just that Australian managers need to promote communication approaches that are a bit more flexible. Most of the time, people in Australia, they speak clearly, directly, and to the point. But this technique of talking doesn't always work with co-workers from cultures where communication is seen a bit more indirect or nuanced. Now, an Australian would think it's completely usual to criticize someone directly at a meeting, but someone from Japan or India might think it's rude or embarrassing, but instead it's better to just take a gentler approach like putting constructive criticism between nice compliments or concentrating on how behavior affects results there. Now, next slide. All right. Now, Australian managers must understand how to have meetings that are open to everybody. Meetings are often where communication breaks down. Meetings are often where communication breaks down in teams with people from different backgrounds. Now, people on the Australian team might feel free to speak their minds, but some would stay quiet just out of respect for the group's leadership or to keep the peace. It's crucial to give everyone a chance to speak up. This could entail asking quieter team members to speak up directly or checking in with them afterwards. On to the next slide there. Now, on top of that, focusing on creating a balance between creating relationships and getting things done is very important. People in Australia often work in a way that is realistic and just focused on results, but in a lot of cultures, having good relationships is important for developing trust and getting things done. Now, Australian managers should spend time getting to know their staff and exhibiting real interest in their background and values. This doesn't mean that things will move more slowly, just means that the base for working together will be stronger. On to the next slide there. Now, another thing that needs attention is feedback. It's one of the most touchy things about talking to people from other cultures. An Australian manager might think that honest, useful feedback is helpful, while someone from a culture where criticism is handled more gently might think it's confrontational. That's why it is so crucial to have clear rules for giving and getting criticism. For instance, as a group, just decide if feedback should be offered in secret or in public, and if it should be direct or indirect as well. Moving on to the next slide. We also suggest using hybrid communication protocols. So instead of expecting everyone to use the same way of communicating, just look for opportunities to mix different styles, use organized agendas to fulfill the needs of people who like to talk directly, but also give people that time to talk freely so that team members who do like to think can add their thoughts. On to the next slide. It is also crucial to see how things vary within a different culture. Now, people from the same cultural background, they won't all talk to each other the same way, but people who are second generation immigrants, international students, or have worked abroad may find their own unique ways of communicating. Now, don't make assumptions or generalizations. Instead, just give team members the chance to talk about their preferences and change the way you talk to them based on what they say. And moving on to the next slide. And just finally here, one of the best things managers can do is lead by example. When managers talk to each other in a polite and open way, it sets the tone for the whole team. Recognize and reward behaviors that are sensitive to different cultures, and just tell team members to help each other out. Most essential, make sure everyone feels safe to speak up, ask questions, and make errors without worrying or being judged. People are more likely to help come up with new ideas and work together when they do feel protected in that space. And that completes our presentation. Just in conclusion, making communication better in multicultural teams isn't about getting rid of cultural differences, just about accepting and handling them well. Australian managers are able to make their team stronger, more connected, and more successful by learning about other cultures, changing the way they communicate, and leading with empathy and purpose. But that wraps up our presentation. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.